OMORI at its core is essentially a hero's journey. It depicts a story of self-discovery and overcoming obstacles, followed by a cast of companions that witness your journey and improve alongside you. What separates OMORI from the cliché is the basis of the plot, the character development and the execution of its themes, world building, character personalities, and of course, the narrative. This game is definitely one that I recommend you go in knowing as little as possible, and for that reason I won't talk too much about the specifics of the plot. But since you're already here, you probably already have an existing interest in the game, or already played the game. Anyways, who am I, why should you listen to me, and why am I making this video? Well, my name's Jack, although that doesn't really matter, and I'm making this video mainly as a means to convince my friends to play this wonderful game without having to repeat myself each time. And hopefully as a byproduct, attract other people who are not my friends to also try out this game. I seriously just want more people to learn about this game. As for why you should listen to me, I've been a professional opinion haver for around 20 years, so that should make me qualified. Here's the structure of this video. I'll first discuss the importance of the character aspects of the game, then talk about the gameplay, arguably the worst aspect of OMORI, but that doesn't necessarily imply it's a bad aspect of the game for most people. And then the plot, which is the main praise for the game and why I personally find the game to be amazing. Obviously, I won't say anything regarding plot itself, only discuss its execution and talk about the game's themes. And to end the video off, the discussion section, or what I call the Who Asked section, which is basically a segment of the video where I share my thoughts and opinions. You can click off after the plot section. Disclaimer again, I'm obviously going to avoid spoilers for the game since this is meant to be a video at the very least to convince some friends to play in the future, but I will talk about some themes present in the game without specifying the context behind it. Enjoy this non-in-depth review about OMORI. I can't say this is true for every person, but whenever I play a video game, I tend to subconsciously self-insert myself as the game's protagonist, regardless of how their personalities misalign with mine, or whether they have tits or not. Obviously, there are certain people that pick the opposite gender whenever given the option to, so they can stare at certain parts of the body. But for me, I prefer to make a game story, or any story for that matter, as relatable as possible. I feel like this helps focus on the narrative more. This is often why I tend to become too attached to characters if they are written well, because it's almost as if I'm personally connected to them. A core part of OMORI is your connection to the characters, which is why I'm starting off the review with this section. You, the protagonist, have a group of close friends who are part of your journey till the end, and you learn about them and strengthen your connection to them at each step of the way. As you play the game, you hear about their backstories, their connections to the protagonist, their varying personalities, and many minor dialogues and small conversations, all of which add up to the characters feeling real. These companions don't solely exist to fulfill a goal for the story. They function as people inside the game with their own flaws and strengths that are perceivable, and as the plot progresses, you can almost start to predict how each character will react to certain situations. And this is not a bad thing for the game. It doesn't make the plot weak because certain parts are predictable, but instead it's almost as if you're starting to understand these fictional characters, as if they were your real friends, and you're becoming acquainted with them. You know how every friend group has that one individual with a very unique way of thinking, also known as being stupid? And you often can tell when they're about to get your group into trouble? That's how I felt a lot of times in the game whenever one of the characters had a dialogue. But the character designs also aren't the typical cliche, where they are assigned a certain trope and act the exact same way throughout the story. For example, the idiot of the group isn't even stupid 100% of the time just for comedic effect. It's more like he's a dumbass for 99% of the time, but his actions aside from that are crucial for development of the protagonist, and he shows his own worth as a character. I'm honestly joking in regards to statistics, but you get the point. His role isn't only to act as a clown, but as an actual important part of the main cast. Another example is the oldest member of the group, who at first glance seems like the perfect individual who can do no wrong, and is capable of solving every problem. Almost like a superhero. Another cliche. However, past the surface level, you learn that he obviously isn't as perfect as he looks, and suffers from his own flaws and issues, maybe even more so than anyone else in the main cast. I won't talk about every character present in the game, that's your job for when you play it. However, I'm simply trying to showcase the importance of the characters and how they are well designed. I'm obviously not doing them justice, but I find it difficult to note the strengths of the character writing without going to specifics. Just understand that companions are a necessary part of this story. Without those characters, the story of OMORI would not exist. So if you enjoy character interactions and the feeling of having friends even though you don't have any in real life, then OMORI is already perfect for you. Let's talk about gameplay now. I will say that gameplay is arguably OMORI's weakest point. That's not to say that I think the gameplay was awful or boring, but it just so happens to be the worst aspect of the game. Much like eating popcorn, it's not a bad snack, but relative to chips or fries, they are the worst snack in that category, and much like turn-based combat, I'm not a big fan of popcorn. I recognize that this style of gameplay is not for everyone, but even if you dislike turn-based combat, I still suggest you stay until the plot section of this video, because I believe that the story alone is worth playing the game for. The game mechanics are similar to that of rock, paper, scissors, where certain attacks are stronger against certain types of enemies. There's a bit of skill expression in that sense, where you can buff your allies to adjust to certain enemies, or debuff enemies so they are weakened against your party, but for the most part it's not the most complicated system. And although there is a bit of grinding to the game, I felt like cumulatively, it did not exceed more than 2 hours of playtime. But your experience could be different. Just know that if you skip every random enemy encounter, that you will eventually struggle in some battles. I'd recommend at the very least to kill every random enemy encounter at the start of your playthrough, and you should be fine for the mid to late game. Aside from combat, there are many mini-games and side quests that you can complete, and I can say they're very well worth it, as they provide unique experiences, whether that's introducing some completely new game mechanics, interesting side stories, or even stories that add on to the main quest. Also, some side quests are tied to achievements, so look out for those if you're interested. And I thought I'd add this to the gameplay section of the video, even though it's not related, but the soundtrack for this game is beyond S tier. Just take a listen. As a final piece of advice, without adding context, remember that you can apply to all the jobs at a certain point in the story. You're not limited to choosing only one. Oh, and by the way, good luck delivering pizzas. I don't want to say OMORI's a masterpiece, but it's the closest game that meets the criteria in my eyes. However, while I do believe that OMORI's main strength is its storytelling, I don't believe that the plot itself is so good that it will justify any distaste one may have for the game. For example, if you're a psychopath and you happen to dislike all the main characters in the game, then the plot may fall short from your perspective. The story heavily relies on the audience's connection to both the protagonists as well as their companions. And if you dislike the gameplay and you're not instantly hooked at the start, the game does take a while to reach the juiciest part of the plot. One criticism that does exist for the game is its slow start. While I don't think the pacing is an issue, it does take a while until you reach the point of the story where everything clicks. However, I'm confident in my assessment that even if there are parts of the early game that you do not enjoy, if you pull through and reach a conclusion, then it'll all be worth it. One final disclaimer, I will discuss the themes and some topics that exist in OMORI. If you want to avoid all possible spoilers, then leave now and give the game a chance. Simply discussing the theme spoils the first hour of the game, so if OMORI interests you in any way, give it a shot. If you take a look at the Steam store page and check the disclaimer for the game, you'll notice that the game depicts a few non-wholesome topics that are not intended for children to see. This already should tell you that the happy vibes that the introduction of the game displays is probably an act. OMORI at its core has mental illness as a major theme for its storytelling, and is represented in a very unique way. Or at the very least, it shows the manifestation of mental illness due to circumstances, but that's getting into specifics. While the game doesn't necessarily have an accurate portrayal of this theme in a literal sense, I don't think that was ever the intention of the game. They are portrayed in ways that the average player can see and understand the negative effects of trauma, what it can do to someone, and ways to cope with it, using gameplay mechanics. I guess one way to call it would be an artistic representation of a certain topic. And it's not used as a theme to lure the player into feeling bad for the characters, but as a natural occurrence due to circumstances. I never once felt that the game was intentionally trying to make me sympathize with the characters. It always felt like I naturally understood them through the plot itself, and not because I'm depressed, but because of how well executed this theme is inside the game. It serves as a major plot point and exists to explain everything that's going on, and through these explanations, I and so many other people just so happen to feel sympathy for these fictional characters due to what happens. In regards to the writing, OMORI starts off slow and builds its way up to the climax. The start of the plot is more lighthearted and contains more comedic moments, but as it nears its conclusion, the darker themes start to pop up. This is why some criticism for the game is that it can take too long for the game to reach its most interesting point. However, the way it's handled is that the plot slowly leads you on, and by the time you reach what would be considered a climax, all of the pieces have been handed to you, and now it's your job to figure out the mystery. However, because it's not rushed in any way, when you finally solve the puzzle, it's almost as if it was expected. Yet you probably wouldn't have predicted this outcome without hindsight. This is why I don't believe the pacing was ever an issue. It always felt right, and every time the plot progressed, I wasn't left with questions unanswered, but instead new questions regarding the unknown. There was always a purpose to everything you were doing, with clues hinting at the complete story of the game. OMORI includes too many subtle details, almost to a fault, but that's also what makes the conclusion of the story so sweet. Well, maybe not that great depending on the ending you got, but even so, the story truly felt complete in the end. And I don't want people to think that OMORI only depicts topics related to psychology. That's not the point at all. It only serves as a major theme to the story, a catalyst for the events that occur. However, OMORI's plot has something for everyone. Comedic moments to lighten up the eventual dark mood of the setting, good character writing, enjoyable moments with the main cast, a good amount of content involving both main story and side stories alike, and a well-executed hero's journey for an overall good narrative. It's a common joke in the community to say that OMORI as a game is all about depression and sadness, and obviously there's some truth to it. There are moments in a story where you might feel depressed from certain events. However, that's not the main point of OMORI. The intention of the game is to tell a story of overcoming obstacles and self-improvement. It just so happens to deteriorate the mental state of many people, but that's just the byproduct of story being well made. Obviously not everyone will enjoy the game. It's only natural, and their experiences are just as valid as mine and many others who do enjoy it. But at the very least, I want people to at least commit to the full story and then make their judgment, as opposed to simply quitting before giving the plot a real chance. Obviously this review is biased. I have nothing but praises for the game, but even so, give the game a try. I'm clearly not the only person with positive things to say about the game. There are over 20,000 positive reviews on Steam. This game requires a bit of patience, and there is a huge payoff, but at the end of the day, all I can really say is, trust me bro, it's good. So this is the discussion section. Feel free to leave now. I'm just gonna share some thoughts regarding why I made this video. I wish I could do it unscripted, but we would be here for a while if I did, so I'll save you guys the trouble. I often struggle to explain to others why certain games are good. This is already cringe. Apart from spoiling details about the game which risk ruining the authentic experience, I find it quite difficult to put into words the quality of a game and provide a convincing argument for why they should consider spending money for a specific game over another. I mean, most of the time I just repeatedly state the sentence, trust me bro, it's good, until they eventually concede and buy the game, or I call them out for being unintelligent when they choose not to buy that game. But I mean, for whatever reason, I always have the most trouble describing why OMORI is worth a look into. I sometimes struggle to even explain to myself why this game is so good. I picked up this game sometime this summer, and after 3 days, I already finished my first playthrough. My only playthrough actually, because I've yet to go back to complete the alternative path. I don't want to become depressed again. But I mean, maybe I'll stream it sometime in the future to my friend who so desperately wants to watch me play that route, but not right now. Even with only one playthrough though, which lasted 25 hours, why was this game specifically, despite my multiple playthroughs of Dark Souls 3, my surreal experience with Nier Automata, my immersive journey through The Witcher, my unique experience with Life Black Tiger, as well as many other well-regarded titles, why did OMORI end up becoming my favorite game almost instantly? I feel like part of that reason is because I'm currently studying psychology, so I'm a bit biased when it comes to games with themes like this, but I just really enjoyed the story as well as the characters. It's honestly hard to put into words. If I let my ADHD run wild, I could talk about this game for probably 4 hours and 37 minutes, approximately. Obviously my inexperience with writing showed in this video. With a bit more time and effort, I probably could have refined my points better and structured it differently. but at the end of the day, this was a passion project, and my expectations for this was, at the very least, to convince some friends, including one British rat who's watching this right now, to buy the game. Any more would be an over-accomplishment. This was an interesting experiment, though. Even if this only gets one view, I don't regret much. I discussed my favorite game, and I finally completed a video about it, so if you're here, you know who you are. I'm finally done. Hope whoever watches enjoys this though. If you're recommended this video by YouTube, you're probably consuming too much OMORI content, let's be honest here.